Robert Hayes was 64 years old, and for the last 2 years, he had lived alone in the house he built with his own hands. It stood at the end of Maple Street, a modest two-story home with a wraparound porch his late wife Margaret had loved so much. Every morning, Robert made 2 cups of coffee before remembering there was only one person to drink it now. He would pour the second cup down the sink, slowly, like it was still part of the ritual. He kept her garden alive. He fixed a fence every spring. He sat on the porch in the evenings and talked to her the way some people talk to old friends who've moved far away, telling her about the weather, the neighbors, the small things that used to matter to both of them. His son David visited sometimes. Not often, but enough. And in the last few months, David had started bringing his wife, Vanessa, along more frequently. Robert liked Vanessa at first. She was polite, always asked about his health, always complimented the house, running her fingers along the banister as if admiring craftsmanship she had never noticed before. "It's such a big place for just you, Dad," she said one Sunday, looking around the living room like she was measuring it for furniture that wasn't hers yet. Robert laughed it off. "I've got plenty of room for memories," he said. But that evening, after they left, he noticed something on the kitchen counter. A glossy brochure, folded neatly, tucked half under a fruit bowl, as if someone had left it there by accident, or hadn't quite worked up the courage to hand it to him directly. He picked it up. Sunset Manor Senior Living Community. He set it down slowly, and for the first time in a long while, the house felt a little less warm. Robert told himself it was nothing. Maybe Vanessa had picked it up somewhere out of curiosity. Maybe it meant nothing at all. But 2 weeks later, David called more than usual. He asked about Robert's knees, his memory, whether he'd been getting confused about things lately. The questions came wrapped in concern, but they felt rehearsed, like lines someone had practiced before dialing. Robert hadn't been confused about anything. He paid his bills on time, drove to the hardware store every Saturday, and remembered Margaret's birthday down to the hour she was born. Still, the questions kept coming. Gentle ones at first, then less gentle. At Sunday dinner, Vanessa brought it up directly. "David and I have been talking," she said, setting down her fork carefully, "about what's best for you long term. This house is a lot of upkeep. The taxes, the repairs, it's a lot for someone your age to manage alone." "I manage fine," Robert said. "For now," Vanessa replied, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach her eyes. "But things change. We just want you somewhere safe, somewhere people can check on you." David said nothing. He just looked at his plate, pushing the food around without eating much of it. Robert nodded slowly, the way he always did when he wanted a conversation to end without giving anyone the satisfaction of an argument. That night, after they left, he found something else. A business card slipped from David's jacket pocket onto the hallway floor. Walsh and Greer Law Offices, Elder Estate Planning. Robert turned the card over in his fingers for a long time, reading the name again and again, as if it might change into something less alarming the longer he stared. The next morning, Robert called the law office. He didn't give his name. He simply said he was a friend of David Hayes, helping him gather some paperwork, and asked if there was anything outstanding he needed to bring in. The receptionist, helpful and unaware, told him exactly what he needed to know. Mr. Hayes had a consultation about power of attorney and elder care transfer planning, she said. "We're just waiting on the next appointment to finalize the documents." Robert thanked her and hung up the phone, his hand resting on the receiver longer than necessary. He sat at his kitchen table for a long time after that, the same table where he'd taught David to do homework, where Margaret had iced birthday cakes every September, where holiday mornings had once been loud with laughter. His son was planning to take control of his affairs. Quietly, without asking him. He could have confronted them right then. He could have called David and demanded an explanation, raised his voice, ended things in anger the way some men would have. But Robert had spent 64 years learning that anger rarely won anything. Patience did. His father had taught him that, and his father's father before him. So he made a decision. He would let them think their plan was working. He would watch, listen, and wait. And when the moment came, he would already know exactly how it ended. That night, he opened a drawer in his bedroom closet, one he hadn't touched in almost 3 years. Inside was a folder Margaret had once made him promise to keep safe, no matter what. He hadn't needed it until now. The folder contained documents Robert hadn't looked at since the week after Margaret's funeral. 3 years earlier, an old friend, Walter Greaves, a retired attorney who had known Robert since their school days, sat with him at this same kitchen table, 2 cups of untouched coffee going cold between them. "Bob," Walter had said, "you're grieving, and grieving people make decisions they regret. I've seen it with my own clients. Families circle when there's a house and no one left to protect it." Robert had waved him off at first. David was his son. Surely none of this applied to him. Not his own boy. But Walter insisted, gently, the way old friends do when they know they're right. Put the house in a trust. Not because you don't trust David. Because protecting it now means no one, not even someone with good intentions, can make decisions about it without you ever knowing. Robert had agreed, mostly to ease his friend's worry, signing papers he assumed he would never actually need. The deed to the house was placed into a living trust, with Robert as the sole trustee for as long as he was deemed mentally competent, verified not by a family member's opinion, but by an independent medical evaluation on file with the trust itself. If anyone ever tried to transfer, sell, or mortgage the property without that independent verification, the transaction would be void. Automatically, by law, regardless of who signed what. David didn't know. Vanessa certainly didn't. Robert closed the folder and allowed himself, for the first time in weeks, a small and quiet smile. Over the following month, the pressure increased, slowly at first, then steadily, like water rising in a basement no one had checked in years. Vanessa began arranging things for convenience. A new family doctor for Robert, one she insisted was highly recommended. A checkup appointment scheduled without much warning, slipped into a Tuesday afternoon as if it were nothing. Robert went along with it, observing carefully, saying little. In the appointment, the doctor asked strange, leading questions. "Do you ever forget where you put your keys? Do you ever feel confused about the day of the week?" Questions phrased to invite doubt, not answers. Robert noticed Vanessa nodding eagerly whenever he hesitated, even slightly, before answering, as if every pause confirmed something she already believed. Afterward, in the car, David seemed uncomfortable. "Dad, the doctor just wants to be thorough." "Of course," Robert said evenly. 2 weeks later, a new document appeared on the kitchen table. A power of attorney form, already partially filled in with David's name in the space marked agent. "It's just a safety net," Vanessa explained. "In case anything ever happens. You wouldn't even have to think about it." Robert picked up the pen, paused, and said he wanted his own lawyer to review it first. "Old habits," he told them, smiling gently. Vanessa's smile faltered, just for a second, before she covered it with a nod. That evening, Robert called Walter. "They're building a case," Walter said after hearing everything. A medical opinion questioning your competency, a power of attorney ready to sign, and likely a care facility already lined up. This isn't carelessness, Bob. This is a plan. Walter helped Robert see the full shape of what was happening, piece by piece, like assembling a puzzle no one wanted to admit existed. If the doctor documented even mild concerns, and David held power of attorney, very little would stand in their way. Not legally, and certainly not emotionally, in the eyes of anyone unfamiliar with the truth. They'll likely move fast once the paperwork is signed, Walter warned. Don't sign anything until I tell you to. Not one page. Robert didn't. A week later, he found a folder Vanessa had left behind after a visit, this one not by accident. Inside was a confirmed intake date at Sunset Manor Senior Living, dated for the following month. A welcome packet. A payment schedule for long-term residency, already calculated against the estimated sale value of the house, down to the last dollar. They hadn't asked him. They had decided. Robert sat with that folder in his lap for a long time, feeling something heavier than anger. Grief, almost. Grief for the version of his son he thought he still knew, the boy who used to fall asleep against his shoulder during long car rides. But underneath the grief was something steadier. Resolve. He called Walter again that night. I want to let this play out, Robert said. All the way to the day they try to move me. I want them standing in my living room, fully confident before they understand. Walter was quiet for a moment. That's going to take patience, Bob. I've got nothing but time, Robert said. And I want everything documented. Every conversation. Every signature they try to push. From that point on, Robert became a careful, quiet observer of his own life, almost like a stranger watching events unfold from the corner of a room. He kept a small recorder in his shirt pocket during every visit, every dinner, every innocent conversation about his health or his finances. He photographed every document left on his table before they could be collected again, storing the images carefully on a phone Vanessa had once mocked him for barely knowing how to use. Vanessa grew bolder as the weeks passed, mistaking his calm agreement for confusion, his patience for surrender. "We just think it's time, Dad," she said one evening, patting his hand the way someone pats a child's. "You won't have to worry about anything anymore. We'll take care of everything." "Everything," Robert repeated softly. "The house, the bills, all of it," she said. "Once the paperwork's signed, it'll be such a relief for you, you'll see." David stayed quiet through most of these conversations, but one night, alone in the kitchen, he said something that stayed with Robert longer than anything Vanessa had. "It's not that I don't love you, Dad. Vanessa says it's the responsible thing to do. For everyone." Robert studied his son's face, searching for the boy who used to ride on his shoulders down Maple Street. He found traces of him, buried under exhaustion and quiet submission, like a photograph left too long in the sun. "I understand, son," Robert said, and in a strange way, he meant it. He simply understood something David didn't yet. That love built on someone else's silence rarely survives the moment that silence finally breaks. By early spring, the date arrived faster than Robert expected. Vanessa called one evening, her voice bright and businesslike. "We've arranged everything for Saturday. The transport team from Sunset Manor will come by at 10 in the morning. David and I will be there to help you get settled." "You've arranged everything," Robert said. "We didn't want to overwhelm you with details," she said smoothly. "It's all taken care of. You don't need to lift a finger." Robert thanked her, hung up the phone, and called Walter immediately, his voice steadier than he felt. "This is it," Walter said. "Once they have you out of the house and the paperwork filed alongside the medical notes, they'll move quickly on selling. We need everything in place before Saturday." Together, they prepared. Walter filed paperwork confirming the trust protections were active and verified Robert's full mental competency through an independent evaluation, one Vanessa knew nothing about. They drafted a formal notice of fraudulent intent regarding the power of attorney attempt, ready to be delivered the moment it was needed. Robert also made one more decision that week, quiet, deliberate, and entirely his own. He visited his granddaughter, Lily, David's daughter from his first marriage, the only family member who had called him every single week since Margaret passed, never once mentioning the house, the will, or what he should do with either. He didn't tell her everything, but he asked her one question that made her eyes fill with tears. "If something happened to me, would you want this house to stay in the family the right way?" "Grandpa," she said, "I just want you to be okay." That, Robert realized, was the only answer he needed. Saturday morning arrived clear and quiet, the kind of morning Margaret used to call porch weather. At exactly 10 o'clock, a car pulled into the driveway, followed by a small transport van marked Sunset Manor Senior Living, its side door already sliding open before it had fully stopped. David and Vanessa walked in first, both smiling the practiced, gentle smiles of people who believed they were doing something kind, something they had convinced themselves was an act of love. "Good morning, Dad," David said. "Ready for your big day?" Robert sat in his armchair by the window, fully dressed, a cup of coffee resting calmly on the side table beside him, as though he had been expecting them for hours, not minutes. "Almost," he said. "Sit down. There's something I need to show you both before we go anywhere." Vanessa exchanged a glance with David, the kind of glance that said, "Let's just humor him," before settling onto the couch across from Robert, smoothing her skirt with a kind of practiced patience. Robert reached into the drawer of the side table and placed a small recorder on the coffee table between them. He pressed play. Vanessa's voice filled the room, clear and unmistakable. "Once the paperwork's signed, it'll be such a relief for you." Then another clip. "We didn't want to overwhelm you with details." David's face went pale. Vanessa's smile finally, completely, disappeared, replaced by something colder. "What is this?" she asked, her voice sharper now, almost a demand. "This," Robert said calmly, "is everything you've said to me for the last 3 months." "Dad, we can explain," David started, leaning forward like the right words might still be somewhere within reach. "You don't need to explain," Robert said. "I already understand perfectly." He slid a folder across the table, the same folder Walter had helped him prepare, its edges crisp from how many times it had been reviewed. 3 years ago, after your mother passed, I placed this house into a protected trust," he said. "I'm a trustee. Any transfer, sale, or care facility placement requires an independent medical evaluation confirming incompetency, filed directly with a trust attorney, not arranged by family, and not based on a doctor your wife personally selected." Vanessa's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the folder, her composure cracking at the edges. "That evaluation never happened," Robert continued. "What had happened is a power of attorney form prepared without my consent, a care facility payment plan calculated against the future sale of a house that was never going to be sellable without my approval, and a recorded pattern of pressure that my attorney has already reviewed in full." "You can't prove pressure," Vanessa said, though her voice had lost all its earlier confidence, thinning into something close to panic. "I have 3 months of recordings," Robert said simply. and a filed notice with the county outlining attempted elder financial exploitation. My attorney has copies. So does the county's elder protection office. This isn't a conversation anymore. It's already documented. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the transport van's engine still idling outside, waiting for a passenger who was never going anywhere. David sat frozen, staring at the folder like it might still rearrange itself into something less devastating if he looked at it long enough. "I never wanted any of this," he said quietly. I let myself believe it was for your own good. I told myself that every single day." "I know," Robert said, and for the first time that morning, his voice softened. "That's the part that hurts the most, son. Not what almost happened, but how easily you let yourself believe it, without ever once asking me what I wanted." Vanessa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "We were trying to help. You were trying to take," Robert said, without raising his voice. "There's a difference, and somewhere inside, you both know it. You've known it for months." He didn't call the police. He didn't need to. Walter had already made clear that the documentation alone was enough to permanently void any future attempt at the trust, and enough to ensure neither David nor Vanessa would ever hold legal authority over his affairs again. The transport van left empty that morning, pulling slowly out of the driveway under a sky that had turned a little grayer than it was an hour before. In the weeks that followed, David visited alone several times, mostly in silence. Vanessa did not return, not once. Robert eventually amended the trust, not out of spite, but out of clarity. Lily, his granddaughter, was named as the future trustee, not because she had asked for anything, but precisely because she never had. Spring turned into summer, and the house on Maple Street stood exactly where it always had, weathering one more season the way it had weathered every season before. Robert kept Margaret's garden blooming, planting the same tomatoes she always insisted on, even though he never much cared for them himself. He fixed the porch railing himself, the same way he had every year before any of this began. David came by more often now, quieter, more honest, sitting across from his father at the same kitchen table where everything had once nearly fallen apart. Their conversations were slower, careful, rebuilding something that had nearly been traded away for convenience. One evening, sitting on the porch with a single cup of coffee, Robert thought about Walter's warning from 3 years earlier, the one he'd almost dismissed entirely as unnecessary worry. Families circle when there's a house and no one left to protect it. He hadn't needed to fight loudly. He hadn't needed anger or courtrooms or raised voices in front of strangers or anything that resembled the kind of revenge people whispered about. He had simply needed patience, a folder kept safe in a closet, and the quiet certainty that some things, love, trust, and a house built by his own hands, were worth protecting carefully, even from the people closest to him. Lily visited that weekend, sitting beside him on the porch steps, just like she always had, the way she had every single week for the last 3 years. "You okay, Grandpa?" she asked. Robert smiled, looking out at the garden Margaret had loved so much, still standing, still his, still exactly the way it was meant to be. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," he said.